This is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'm speaking with soprano Elyse Kakacek, who is singing the lead role of Princess Melaine in the world premiere production of the opera Princess Melaine by composer Whitney George and librettist B. Goodman. This opera is the first commission by dell'Arte Opera Ensemble and is part of their 2019 summer festival, Voices from the Tower, that is exclusively featuring works by women. Princess Melaine will be performed in August 16th, 18th, 20th, 22nd, and 24th at La Mama Experimental Theater in New York City. Hello, Elyse. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, who is Princess Melaine in this opera, and what does she want?
Oh my goodness. Princess Melaine is the princess of the opera. However, I've been kind of saying that she's not your mama's princess. She could present as a very passive, like, femme character who just kind of gets walked all over. Mm-hmm. However, she's definitely written in a very different way by Whitney and Brittany. She goes through this special journey of discovering and owning her power in Act 1, and then Act 2 is really kind of the world and outside forces chipping away at that power. So I feel like she's a very important character for our time, because it's kind of a representation of what it takes to be a strong feminine presence in the world today.
Right, but as Whitney was just saying before, it's like the minute you have the lead female character's name in the title, it's like, well,
yes.
what bad is gonna happen to her?
Yes.
But she does survive.
Oh, maybe okay. She does, maybe she doesn't.
Okay.
I don't want to
We
give it
all
away.
have to go see the opera.
You do.
Yes.
I won't reveal it.
So, what is her music like? Do you get arias, duets, ensembles, or is it more through composed?
You know, it's kind of a mixture. I was actually just texting with Whitney yesterday while I was studying my score, and I was just glowing at her about how studying this is like a mixture of studying Strauss, Ravel, and Sondheim with a little bit of Mahler at the same time.
Works for me.
Right? It's beautiful. There are some beautiful themes that come back. It's very lyrical. It's a very lyrically written piece, especially the role of Princess Melaine. Her music is all very, very lyrical in its line. And dramatic also. So there are definite through composed places where it's in a more Wagnerian instinctual type of singing. So it's a super special role to study in that way. Very dynamic.
Right, and you're originating the role. Were you able to work with Whitney and Bee while they were writing this opera?
Yes, I was very privileged to work with them from the day it was kind of incepted. I got to start studying the source material, the Maeterlinck play and the Grimm fairy tale, and then all of the other things that surround that back in the end of August, September last year. And then I've kind of watched them crystallize and curate their adaptation and version of this story over the past however many months, probably 8 to 10 months, and watching it come to life has been so special. And in that process, Bea and I have been in contact about the character development and how it was reading to me while she was working on the scenes and the character arc. And then Whitney and I actually got to meet a few times in person and play with just music and play with my voice so that she could really tailor write the role to exactly what my voice likes to do, which as a singer is the biggest gift I will ever receive, and it's very special and sets me free in a different way.
And have you had a similar experience with other composer librettists when working on new pieces?
No, not this in depth. I've been very fortunate to work with all very collaborative composers, and they've taken, especially in new music, it can be tricky to figure out how voices can work with new textures, especially like percussion ensembles and different chamber groups. The voice fits in differently in different ways. So occasionally there'd be a moment where it's like, oh, this tessitura is tricky for me on this pitch and with this text and with this orchestration, and people are very open to that kind of suggestion. Right. But this situation was much more
ground up.
Yeah, and of the nature of just like Whitney wanted to know who I was and what my muscles enjoy doing so that she could give me that to express this beautiful force of nature that is Princess Mylène.
See, that's the work I love. I love process. I love process in the writing and the creation with my collaborators. But then when having a performer in mind just ramps that up, and then playing with them. I mean, that's what excites me. It's like performing, fine, whatever. It's like, give me the process. So since you've said you've read the Grimm and the Maeterlinck and looked at those, how much change has come through Princess Mylène? How is she represented in Grimm and then in Maeterlinck? And
Sure. Well, they're actually quite different. The Grimm has a bit more of a positive ending, I guess, than the Maeterlinck does. The Maeterlinck kind of takes a Hamlet turn at the end. But I don't want to spoil anything. But overall, it's the essence of Princess Mylène has been very well preserved across all of its different adaptations. And I think that that's the same for what Whitney and Brittany have accomplished here in their piece. Where
really it should be Whitney and Brittany. I know she goes by B, but it is Brittany.
Well, it's tricky because she and I have collaborated for quite a long time, and so it's a new transition for me. And we're also friends. So, the essence of Princess Mylène being this truth-telling, deeply grounded woman has kind of crossed across all of those different adaptations of the story and has remained and maintained itself. So that's what I take away.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think she can be really shifted far from that. And I think that's the beauty of the story. And again, I won't reveal the ending. However, like as a titular character where things don't always go according to my plan, I think that it's a cautionary tale, and that the way that things play out is actually very important for the audience to see, to get close to a character and to see her truth and see her depth, and then realize their power with their choices and decisions surrounding that.
So now, do you feel that this type of collaborative work requires more from you over working and singing traditional canon roles?
It's interesting you ask that, because it's like more and less, because it's a very start-stoppy kind of a process. I will get, inspiration will strike me, and I'll want to spend all night with my score studying, and there's no score yet. You know what I mean? So a lot of the first few months of this was me poring over the source material and poring over the original adaptation and talking with B. And now that I have a score, I can dive in that way. So I've a lot of training in acting, and so it's also been a huge gift to me to be spending the time and the energy with the character before the music's even in front of me.
Right, because that's kind of rare.
It's so rare, and it's such a luxury, and it's really in my process it helps me so much more, because then the music is a vessel for that, and everything comes under that umbrella instead of trying to figure both out at the same time.
Now, you've worked with dell'Arte a few times. When did you first perform with dell'Arte? What brought you to them?
Actually, a woman named Lucy Yates. She is a coach and accompanist and language extraordinaire, a brilliant human being. I was not living in New York at the time. I was living in Chicago, and a friend recommended I coach with her, and she was like, "It's time for you to move to New York. Let me have you sing for all of my people that I respect." And Chris Fecteau and dell'Arte Opera were one of those people. And so I auditioned for them, and at the time I wasn't really sure I was right for anything they were doing in their season, but they did put me in La Callisto 2 seasons ago. And then I also had the opportunity to study Blanche in the Poulon Dialogue of the Carmelites in their scenes program that year.
And Callisto was directed by B.
Yes, it was, and that was our first project together. So yeah, that was kind of our introduction, and then I really was humbled by the attention to detail and work ethic of everyone in the company.
And is that what keeps you coming back to dell'Arte Ensemble?
Yes, it is. And they have a really nurturing environment, but it's also no nonsense. You're really, it's interesting because it's a fine line. It's very much like a regular production schedule, but they're also very devoted to pushing you and challenging your process and trying to like carve out ways that your process can work better for you. So you kind of have to come in willing to be really vulnerable with the way that you work and be open to suggestion. And it's been so valuable to me as an artist to learn about how to articulate my process and learn about the places where I want to listen more and the places where I need to set a boundary and be protective of the way that I do things. And it's a very special thing to practice that on the job. You know what I mean? Like that's...
Yes.
And in a guided way, and in a way that where people understand that that's what's happening. And in the Giovanni last season, where I sang the Zerlina, it was kind of a more extended version of that. It was also an opportunity for me to really extend. I mean, I was involved in a lot last season. It was also scenes and also the recital and also the songs.
Wow.
And, so really pushing myself to do that kind of a lead role and everything else well.
But the Don Giovanni was also a very different take.
Yes.
Because I sat down and spoke with both B and Owen last year, and I know Owen Horsey, who was the director, is he was really bringing the themes of the Me Too movement. And how did that affect Zerlina's journey?
Wow, it affected her a lot, especially since I am a feminist. It was
Right, because she can be done as just like the perky, bouncy little bride, you know.
Yeah, and I've always, even before our production last year, I've always seen her as a deeper character than that, because I think that she's one of Mozart's real characters. You know, he has the classism, and the servant characters are always the ones that can relate to the people the most.
Right.
And there's a real reality there. But this lens, it required of me to put her in a position that I couldn't necessarily relate as well to, like have her be a lot opportunistic and a lot blinded by power and a lot naive about the situation she had gotten herself into. Whereas, like me, Elyse, a feminist, I'm a little more wary of situations like that. So it was very interesting, and it was special to be challenged in that way by Owen. And then from there, she was able to take this really incredible journey from this more naive, disillusioned place to like learning about like how the world really works and learning about what she really wanted with Mazzetto, and that she needed to fight for that and stand up for it, and then owning her power in a completely different way. And it was really beautiful to discover it that way. So.
And was Owen's approach to text different for you because of his principal career working with the plays and teaching Shakespeare? Oh
my goodness. It actually was so special because everything was completely in alignment. Chris Fecto works a lot with the Italian poetry and the scansion of the Italian poetry of Da Ponte, and we had a whole special class on how to read that and how to interpret it. And so it's very similar to the way that, you know, you work with iambic pentameter and Shakespeare. So the two just fused together so naturally as we were working together, and his clarity with what intentions went with which rhythm kind of. But this was also his
first opera he was directing.
It was.
And did you know that?
I knew it intellectually, but I didn't know it in the room. You know what I mean? I felt so safe and comfortable working with him there. I didn't feel any obstacles come up with what he was expecting of us. And it was actually kind of sweet because occasionally he would check in and be like, "Is that something you can do while you're singing?" And it was just, "Of course, I'm so happy to," you know. But he was very respectful of that, and but even unnecessarily so, you know, because everything he was asking was completely within the realm of possibility. So
wow. So one last question: what is up for you next after the festival in August?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I am currently working on my first album ever, and it releases September 1st.
Wow.
Immediately after Milan. Actually, Chris Fecto is playing, and it's featuring the art songs of female composer Valerie Saalbach, who I was introduced to.
I don't know that at all.
Yeah, I was introduced to her through the first dell'Arte festival when I sang her songs on the Untamed recital. So it's kind of it's kind of my manifesto for what I hope American women can embody, and actually people of any gender can embody. It's a celebration of the dynamic aspects of what a feminine spirit is, and I believe that we all have feminine spirit within us. It highlights her 3 song cycles. The first is a set of Sanskrit poetry translated into English. It's erotic love poetry, and it's from 1 BCE to the 14th century, the text.
Okay.
And it's all about females expressing sensuality, but not in the hypersexualized way us Americans are used to. It's in a very beautiful and sacred way. The second song cycle are the poems of Emily Dickinson. So kind of an example of a caged American woman who's desperately trying to connect with other people and with God, but feels inadequate and unable to do so. And then third song cycle are the Elizabeth Barrett Browning poems, Katerina de Camoens. So it's her love letters to her husband across the ocean when she was dying and never going to see him again. So yes, it's just the whole spectrum of feminine capability in one album.
And who is this composer? Is she alive still?
She is alive. She lives on the Upper East Side.
Wow.
Just right here in New York. She's lovely. She's a soprano. She studied at Juilliard, and then made her foray into composition for a bit. She hasn't been composing as actively I think recently, but when I got to work with her a few years ago on these songs, she mentioned that she wanted to get started up again. So I'm very excited to share her music because it's beautifully written for the voice. It's lyrical. The piano parts are just luscious and glorious. And it's just a whole lot of American femme.
Well, that's wonderful. What is her name again?
Valerie Saalbach.
So you heard that. And we all should watch out for this album dropping in September.
September 1st. Yes, and the album's name is Untethered.
There you go.
Yes.
So it's been lovely talking to you. I can't wait to see the operas. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be speaking with mezzo-soprano Liz Bouk. And he'll be singing the role of Queen Anne in the world premiere production of the opera Princess Maleine by composer Whitney George and librettist B. Goodman. This opera is the first commissioned by dell'Arte Opera Ensemble and is part of their 2019 summer festival, Voices from the Tower, that is exclusively featuring works by women. Princess Maleine will be performed on August 16th, 18th, 20th, 22nd, and 24th at La Mama Experimental Theater in New York City. Well, hello, Liz. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. This is my 3rd interview, so I'm probably a little punchy by this point. So who is your character, Queen Anne, and what do they want in this? Because hardly any of us know Princess Maleine. I mean, tell me what you can, because there may be spoilers.
Well, so Princess Maleine is the main character.
Yes.
And she is, I would say, a femme fatale, ingenue. She is like the moon or light. She is just pure. And Queen Anne represents the opposite of that.
Okay. Is she kind of a witch?
I wouldn't say she's a witch. She's actually just a woman who is trying to survive in society and needs to do certain actions in order to keep her lineage alive.
And she has both a daughter and a son in this, right?
Yes, and so the daughter is supposed to marry the prince, and the wedding is all set. The prince, of course, was formerly in love with the title character, Princess Maleine. And she shows up after everyone has thought that she is dead.
All right.
So my daughter, the engagement gets called off. My daughter no longer gets to marry the prince, and that's a big problem. So that's the main conflict for myself in the opera.
Okay.
For Queen Anne.
So this is not your first time working with dell'Arte. You've done a number of works with them. When was the first thing? When did you first come to dell'Arte?
In 2014, I sang a small role in Macbeth. They turned the Big Witches chorus into a trio. And so I had my first taste of their training program that summer.
Which opera was that?
That was Titus's Rosina.
And so what has kept you coming back to work with dell'Arte?
Well, they provide a great training program and a lot of wonderful coachings and master classes with Chuck Hudson and all of those kinds of things. And I've gone through those, for 2 seasons already. So this year I'm not going through those because I've had other gigs. But that is definitely a plus about the program, is the training they provide. And then if you're not in the training, like I am this summer, they just have really high production value, and they hire really good people, and the orchestra is top notch, and the production is great, and I just always love performing with them. It's a real treat.
Well, great. And during this period, though, because you're trans.
Yes.
When did your transition start? I mean, in terms of in relationship when you were working with dell'Arte, and how were they with that?
So that just happened in the past year and a half, my transition and my own coming out. It was very recent. So when I worked with them for the first 2 seasons, I worked with them as Elizabeth Anna Bouk, and I was a very feminine woman. And so now I'm going back and working as Liz Bouk, he, him, his, and they've just embraced me with open arms. They're really happy that I've found myself, and it's been very supportive.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, because, I mean, not so supportive in other places in our country, unfortunately. But it seems like in opera it's opening up, because I know you're not the only trans singer out there that is building a career. But I think you've made some different choices, though, in terms of, I think I was told you're not yet doing hormones, or
That's
because
correct.
of concern about having to retrain your voice.
Absolutely. And if I had found out, 10 or 15 years earlier when I was still really training, I probably would have taken hormones, but right now my mezzo-soprano voice and all the repertoire is pretty solid. And then when I did come out, my voice just got even better because I got more comfortable in my body. So I was like, oh geez, I don't want to take time off right now. So this is what I'm trying for now.
And I bless you for it. I mean, it's none of it's easy per se, but it's easier once you realize and you come to your understanding of who you are.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And so Princess Mylène is a brand new piece. Have you had a lot of chances to work on brand new pieces before this?
I have. I've done a lot of contemporary opera, and I premiered a new role with Whitney, who is the librettist and director for the show, about a year ago, called Tabula Rasa. So I had a chance to work with her words before.
And that was Cantante Project,
was a Cantante Project, yes. And then Brittany also helped me write a show about my life this fall and was my co-librettist. So I'm very familiar with her text. And when we started working on Princess Mylène, and I found out that I'd be involved in the project, I definitely read a translation of the play.
So, which none of us knew even existed, because
it's beautiful.
But it's like, it wasn't first performed finally until like 1962.
Yeah, it's just a gorgeous play, and there's so much symbolism, and I just thought, yes, this is exactly material for an opera, and I'm sure that's why they picked it.
And how much between the play's version of Queen Anne and the opera version is different?
A lot of it is the same, yeah, and so that has made it a really easy transition for me into the role. Now that I got the libretto back and read through that, and we had a libretto read this winter, which was really useful. So I've been able to piece together her character over the past 9 months in little bits, even though we didn't have the music yet.
And you've worked with Bea before, so do you think, was she thinking of you for Queen Anne when she was writing it?
Yes, so before I came out as a man, I played a lot of women who were trapped by society, and Carmen and Lucretia and Fosca, and because I was really bottled up, I didn't really know why.
Right.
And so when they saw this like powerful character who needed like a meaty voice and acting chops, they thought of me. Great.
So then did you have any input into development of the character and development of the score for her?
Not directly. I trust, Whitney and Brittany to create a beautiful piece, and they really have done so. They were certainly open if something isn't working or isn't going to work. They're certainly open to fixing those little things, but they're both just really quality people and have created a really beautiful piece. I was so happy when I got the score.
But it's also exciting that it is the first commission for dell'Arte.
Absolutely, and it's nice that they're supporting, up-and-coming young people such as Whitney and Brittany.
You've gone through the training programs at dell'Arte. What does that entail?
So with a more traditional piece that's already, in the repertoire, we start several months before and start coaching with Chris Fecto and looking at character work and doing really slow, detailed work over several months. And that's something that really appealed to me, is their focus on process. And in addition to that, they have master classes, and then these master classes with Chuck Hudson as well, for movement. So there's kind of looking at the character from all elements, you know, linguistically and musically and character study and physical body, all before we start rehearsals in the summer.
Cool. I mean, that's rare, I know.
It's very rare.
So...
And with this new piece, we didn't have the music as early, so I tried to start some of the other parts of the process, like reading the play and thinking about her character arc and talking to Brittany about the words she was using to describe her and what other characters say about her in the show, and piecing that together over the past couple months.
Yeah, I know Elyse was talking about that went a deep dive into research. Now, from after this, or actually before this, you have another big gig, which is Stonewall and New York City Opera, which is presented as, I mean, the first role written for a trans singer.
It is. It is. And this is slightly controversial. I'm going to say it aloud. It is. I'm definitely a transgender person, and it was a role that has been written for me. I don't have a trans voice. I haven't transitioned with my voice. So I'm still using my birth voice. However, what's really exciting about this role is that it was written, in Stonewall, the role of Sarah was written for a transgender woman's voice. So although a trans woman was not cast for this production, it's just this beautiful kind of clarity of tone, and it's one of the more delicate roles I've had to play. And I really hope that in the next production that they're able to find a trans woman to portray it. So I'm kind of a turning point right now for that portrayal of transgender singers and people on stage.
Right, and it's, I mean, of course it would be Nico, even if it's a new version of it, that would do that. Because, I mean, when do we think we're actually going to see that at the Met?
I don't know, but I hope soon. I want to advocate for trans women to sing this role next, and I want to. It's annoying sometimes being the turning point, because some people like it, some people are happy with what I'm doing, and some people think it's terrible what I'm doing. But, you know, these things take time to change, and They do, and I mean, it's still, there's a trans person in a trans role. I mean, a lot of people...
It's a major step forward to start with.
Absolutely, and it's a major step forward that they wrote it with the transgender voice in mind. Right,
but I also know you performed, and you are performing again, Hannah After?
Yes.
In As One.
So that one's less controversial for me personally, because it was written for a cisgendered voice, and technically I still have a cisgendered voice.
Yes.
So I have less personal conflict with that role. But what's been interesting about her is, in that show, I have to make peace with my female self in order to portray her, and that has been really healing and really difficult and really beautiful.
Opera as healing.
Absolutely.
Yes, and that's a work that can definitely do that. Definitely. So after all this, what's next after that? And we're talking about after August.
After August, I'm going to be in another production of As One. I'm self-producing it here in New York City in October or November with a colleague of mine, and we're going to delve into it and to see if we can find a fresh take on the staging and do a kind of collaborative new look at the piece.
Would you think of taking Hannah before at that point at all, or?
That's a very interesting question.
I mean, it's a tenor, so.
Oh, it's a baritone.
Oh, it's a baritone. Yeah, it is. Yes, but not necessarily. I mean, ready for this performance, but it's a thought to look at, maybe.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
So yeah, I'm glad to help. And what else after that?
That's all right now.
Yeah, that's probably about, and so yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing this, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again in the future as you continue your journey.
Yeah,
and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be talking with composer and conductor Whitney George about Princess Molaine, her new opera to a libretto by B. Goodman. This is the first opera commissioned by dell'Arte Opera Ensemble, and it is receiving its world premiere production as part of their 2019 summer festival, Voices from the Tower. This year's festival is exclusively featuring works by women. Princess Mylène will be performed on August 16th, 18th, 20th, 22nd, and 24th at La Mama Experimental Theater in New York. So, hello, B. I mean, oh my God, that's our collaborator. Hi, Whitney.
Hello.
I was joking before with Elyse, who I just spoke with, and that B's real first name is Brittany, and you really should just do something with that.
With the Brittany and Whitney, I know.
The Brittany,
I know. We're a nice duo with the names that end in Y. Absolutely.
Neo-punk classical rock duo.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from California. I grew up in the Bay Area around San Francisco. Did some of my schooling in Northern California, but a majority of it I did in Southern California at the California Institute of the Arts, this Disney-endowed school of kind of insanity and interdisciplinary madness in Valencia. But yeah, I've been out of California for a number of years now. I would safely say that New York is my home. I always kind of knew I was supposed to be here. I always wore all black living in California too, but that's...
and I'm sure they look like...
I think you might find yourself in New York at some point. And,
so when did you come to New York?
So I've been here for 11 years now, and I think, unless it's just urban legend, I think you get to call yourself a New Yorker once you've been here for more than 10 years, right? Okay, good. Or as soon as you pay a bunch of taxes, I think here, right?
I'm a native, so...
Oh, okay. All right, so perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been here for the last 11 years. Originally came here to pursue my master's degree, but beyond that, really knew that as an artist, I think I would find what I wanted to do in New York above any other place. Yeah.
Yes, it is. There's so many possibilities here.
Yeah.
Especially in classical music still. Thankfully, still.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, I hadn't known anything about that even Maeterlinck's play existed, or the Brothers Grimm tale it's based on, until I did some research today on Wikipedia. How did the story of Princess Mylène find you?
Great, that's a great question. So Chris Facteau, who is the artistic director of dell'Arte Opera, is very enamored of the Boulanger sisters. I have a similar love for their work, and Lily actually wrote an opera based on Princess Mylène, and it is. We don't know really where it is, what has happened to it, how it was destroyed. If memory serves, Chris actually has a little bit of it in his possession. I don't recall where we last left off with that, but when he was telling me about it, I was knee deep in already writing my own opera, so best not to even deal with other
I know,
things.
But that's what happened to so many female composers' works of that period. Is just, I mean, if they were even allowed to compose and be considered a composer to start with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then to think that it was Lily Boulanger, and you think it's like someone somewhere should...
Yeah, so it's so Chris mentioned that this was made into an opera. I read the original, and so did Brittany, my librettist, and we really, obviously, there's such fairy tale and fantasy and everything that you could possibly want in an opera. Murder, betrayal, love, unrequited love, very cool symbolism that occurs in the original too. It's very, very ripe for translation into music, especially when you're talking like instrumental sort of things. So,
so Chris brought it to you in a sense, and then commissioned the two of you.
It sort of went hand in hand with a conversation where dell'Arte has been around for a while, and as a composer who's obviously currently living and breathing, it's my mission to try to get people to commission new things, not necessarily of my own, but man, just like people should just be funding new, different, more diverse work. And so it was kind of a perfect storm of those two ideas. High time for a commission, and also there's this narrative of a lost opera that could be sort of made anew.
Now, had you worked with B before this, but not as only a director, not a librettist yet?
So I had worked with her as a director over the summer, again with dell'Arte, and very immediately we got along very famously and figured out that we would be very fast friends. Before Princess Mylène even came about, we worked on a couple of songs together, just low stakes, sort of just for fun. a set we call the Fizz and Ginger set, which are kind of prohibition style songs, very bathtub gin kind of inspired, somewhere between jazz, and I use that very air quotes and loosely, whatever that might mean, and like thorough composed 20th century kind of. So there's definitely some very like art song, new music-y parts, but also some very like jazz oriented kind of changes, a very jazz inspired combo in terms of the instrumentation. So we did some of those projects before Milan, and then jumped right into it. Yeah.
And how much input have you had on the shaping of libretto with B?
Oh my gosh! In terms of a collaborator,
and she's also directing this.
She is
and
directing,
you're
conducting.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's the way to go. Just
totally. I love this very quasi-Wagnerian approach of having my hands in multiple aspects of the creative process. Definitely having come from Cal Arts, that's something that they do a lot, is interdisciplinary stuff. So, you know, it was very common for me to not only be like, you know, the composer and the conductor of the work, but also put a part of like the stage design, set design, the costuming, those sorts of things. With Brittany, she's going to be the stage designer of this. I get to have my hands in the conducting aspect of it, which is really, really exciting too.
But also then in the development of libretto.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
That's okay. Did you sit down at the beginning and then go through the play and talk through?
So in terms of...
I mean, in musical theater, that's kind of what happens. You sit down and then you kind of send the book right away for a while and everything.
Totally. So the text in its totality didn't exist all at once. So I got like parts of Act 1 first, and they were kind of up for discussion. You know, there's a lot of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, when it comes to the lyrics and the music. So there are definitely times, for the most part, I had the text to work with initially, but there were definitely times where I talked to Brittany. I'm like, hey, I need more here. I need someone to respond to this kind of idea. And she's so wonderfully flexible with that sort of stuff. So anything that I really felt that I needed, she delivered, which was such a beautiful thing.
And is there, I mean, anything you actively changed from the Maeterlinck?
Oh my gosh, yes. The original text has lots of plot holes that that require, if it were to be staged, they need to be kind of filled in some way. So it's an adaptation and a sort of like fantastical realization of the original, but it's Brittany's version of it.
So can you give me a short, what is the story of Princess Milan?
So that's...
Because none of us know.
Great, okay. So I hope someone else also does this, but I will try to do it as succinctly as possible.
Yes.
I will side tangent slightly to be like, someone else asked me this question, was like, give me the 10-minute summary. And I was like, great. 45 minutes later, I still haven't finished the opera.
Let's go for a paragraph.
Okay, perfect. So Princess Milan is a story of a woman who ends up being engaged to someone she's not supposed to be engaged to, falls in love with someone else. We have a very typical family divide that keeps our lovers apart from one another, which then ends up being resolved in Act 2 in a variety of ways. I don't want to give away too many plot points, but we do have a princess in a tower, we have a prince, we have lots of murder as promised, disguises, lots of points of comedy and relief. Everything that you think a fairy tale would have, it's there. We're maybe short a dragon, but there's like but there's a pub scene, there's royalty and nobility, there are castle guards.
Is there a kind of witch?
There's so the queen and one of the queens is very witch like. It even has like a kind of like incantation scene that happens. It's very murderous and mysterious. The Dies Irae compositionally makes it a large appearance, which means, you know, just spells doom and gloom for us. So there's everything that you would really think of a typical fairy tale. It's there, but there's some cool twists. If I give them away now, though, exactly.
No. So what's the style of the score? Is it more through compose? Is it set pieces?
So at this point, as a conductor and a composer, I've studied a bunch of different scores. So I would say that the score is a very interesting assemblage of things that I've been musically influenced by. In terms of what I sound like as a composer, I'm definitely tonally influenced. Chris, when I asked him, like, well, what do you think the opera sounds like? He said, quote unquote, tonal enough, which I think honestly is a wonderful, I laughed just like that as well. I was like, you know what, that is definitely true. It is just that, it's tonal enough. But there are whole sections and swaths that are like kind of more set class inspired, that really deal with like a harmonic saturation. intervals that we love, thirds, but still used in kind of different ways. There are like these very dreamlike passages that use a lot of whole tone stuff. So like again, tonal enough in the fact that like I have some sort of root. There's definitely sections of this that are truly recit as well. You know, chord, have someone speak over it. There are true like moments that are actual sung numbers as well, arias, duets, etc., ensemble bits. They're true finales in the opera too, where everyone's singing. We have a chorus and the whole bit. So, and I thought that was a really important aspect to maintain our element of fantasy. Fantasy is both rooted in reality and a grand expression of reality. So we have to have some sort of familiarity for us to think of it as bigger and grander than itself.
Yes.
So I thought that like if the opera was just too new, too out, we wouldn't feel like it has this bigger than life feel. But that's not to say that it's not experimental.
Right,
yeah.
but if you went to like the total way of a lot of Maeterlinck is very symbolistic and non-realistic, and you have a chance of losing your audience.
Totally, and I think the pacing, at least from what I've heard from the singers, is it goes by real damn quickly, that's for me a sign of a good work. It's when like you're not worried about how much time has elapsed from the beginning to the end. It just continues and flows. So
right.
So in that the orchestra, it's a 16-piece orchestra, individual strings, but that's we were talking about early Schoenberg and stuff. He got a lot of mileage out of like single string orchestra, so it's big.
I like ensembles of that size.
So good.
It just because you hear the different timbres of the instruments and the qualities, and it lets you as a composer, orchestrator, play with using them to influence what's happening or to indicate specific characters.
The beginning of the opera, just to like be specific, has a very Ivesian kind of feel to be at the beginning. We have a whole part of the opera that's actually on stage, that's participating in like diegetic music, that's a part of our party, and then we have underscoring that's happening simultaneously in the pit. It's a very, very cool thing, but like those kind of like bendings of reality where it's like those two ideas are very tonal together, they're polytonal, but we still have like, we have an ear for it, which I think is, so I guess that's how I would answer that question.
So mention Ives. Are there other composers or orchestrators that have influenced this work? I think we were out there before we got here, we were talking about Menotti. My love of Menotti.
Oh my gosh, Menotti. So like, I got to conduct in Menotti's The Medium, which I am so enamored of that opera. I think that I like to think that I'm a tiny little sponge, so anything that I end up studying ends up being a part of whatever, anything that happens conductor-wise ends up being a part of my compositional vocabulary. And I remember putting together that score and just trying to think of like, where is it hard for me to put this together? And it's always the combination of like going from recit to sung number, recit to, and that's not an uncommon problem for opera in terms of getting those things to mesh together. So I just remember the moments that I felt that he did that so incredibly well, and was like, I'm gonna, a good composer steals rather than borrows, right? So I tried to steal from my favorites. So Menotti was definitely on the top of that list. I got to study with David Del Tredici, and he has such a brilliant sense of drama, even obviously with the song cycles, and he's got that grand sense of fantasy too. So that was. He's a big influence orchestrationally as well. So I would say maybe those two composers, one very contemporary and still living, and then one sadly not living, but like but also still in like Bartók, like Bluebeard's Castle. I love it. I mean, this is nowhere near as big as Bluebeard, but in terms of like that kind of mileage from getting every ounce of color that you can from the orchestra, that's one of my major concerns for Milan.
Now also you have a kind of more friends along for the ride because you have your musical ensemble, Curiosity Cabinet.
Yes, the Curiosity Cabinet.
And they're the orchestra for this.
That is the icing on top of the cake for me. What's brilliant is, so I wrote the opera from full score. I did not start as a piano reduction.
Wow.
Which meant that, and I will to Chris, because he and I have really tag teamed that together, but the majority of the work he has honestly done, and that's not a fun task to reduce 17 parts to one piano part. So again, orchestration is a huge important factor to me. When I write for piano and orchestrate it out, it really ends up sounding like just that, like a piano piece that is orchestrated out. So I needed to do the exact opposite there. So my for that reason, I knew, if because we had talked about hiring my ensemble while it was being written, I knew who was going to play the flute part. That flute player has been a part of my works for the last 11 years. Like, she has gotten to listen to all of like the specialized flute melodies that I've got, and that's a really rewarding thing to get to show someone a work in progress. And then she's a great interpreter of my music as well. She's like, I've seen this gesture a million times. I know exactly what you mean by it. I don't even this is well in your vocabulary. I know exactly what it means, and that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling. It's like I have certain performers, singers, actors I work with, but I missed from college that I had a whole cadre of musicians that I was actively writing for, and, they would sit and say, no, that's not quite working. It's like, and that collaboration of, let's work through this and bring it to the best possibility for what works for you and what encapsulates what I want.
Totally. Yeah. And the concert master, I love how meticulous he is for his part preparation. I'm already excited. Like, I already know who's getting music first, because I know who wants to mark up their stuff. And I even to that extent know who wants cues from other people. And that's so, and people have already been asking me for music. Hey, is the horn part available yet? I'm like, oh gosh, like soon, a couple days. But that's the next level of when your collaborators are really, it's not just people who are coming in and playing notes and rhythms. There are people who are truly invested in what I do.
Well, I can't wait to hear this and see this.
Good.
And what's next after this?
That's a great question. So, what is next? In New Camerata Opera, we are doing an opera scene based on a historical figure, Julie de Aubigny, who is a swashbuckling French swords master of swords. Okay. She fought for the hand of many, many different women as a woman herself, and was really, really good at winning duels. She also happened to be an opera singer. She's like the subject for an opera. So we're working on like a kind of 3-part narrative of her life, possibly with the idea that this might be a larger thing that would happen on a bigger, grander scale. So it's going to be like a televised sort of format in these 3 7-minute episodes. So that I'm working on with librettist Lila Palmer right now. So that's the big thing that's on the horizon.
That's big enough.
Yeah.
So it's been great talking with you, and run out and get your tickets now to dell'Arte's Opera Festival, Summer Opera Festival, and you too can hear and see what Princess Melaine is all about.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, this is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be talking with Sarah Young, who is directing La Liberazione di Ruggiero by Francesca Caccini. That is being produced by dell'Arte Opera Ensemble as part of their 17th annual summer festival, Voices from the Tower, August 10th through the 25th at La Mama. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, thank you.
So, is this your first season working with dell'Arte?
It is.
And how did that come about?
Well, actually, the lighting designer, Dante, who is fabulous and has worked with dell'Arte for a couple of seasons now, worked with me and heard that they were looking for a primarily female creative team for this season and recommended me to Chris.
And where was that, here he worked with you, or I know you're from the San Francisco area?
I am, yeah. I spent my whole life on the West Coast, actually, but I moved here 3 years ago to get my MFA in directing at the New School, and I just graduated in May, so I met Dante through the New School.
And you came here to enjoy all our great humidity.
Yes.
Yes. So, I know this opera is double cast, and how does that work in terms of your rehearsal scheduling and making sure that you give each cast member some due diligence?
Absolutely. Yeah, double casting is actually kind of fun. I like to group think solutions and character discoveries, so having more than one person per role can lead to some really interesting discussions between those two actors. In terms of how I handle it in the room, I will start staging a scene with one cast, go for a while, then switch, have the other cast to do what we just did, and then make sure that I give that cast now a chance to stage further into the scene. The trick is to make sure you're not spending too much time on the initial staging with one cast, because you want each cast to have equal ability to create their own spin on the role.
But they're called, all of them are called for the same rehearsal period?
Correct.
That is different.
Yeah?
I would imagine, but it also gives them a chance to see what's going on there.
Yes.
And hopefully watch what's going on.
Oh, yeah, and when we're running scenes, we often do a thing called mirroring, where you have one cast in front and one cast in the back, and everyone's running it at the same time, and then I'll switch it to make sure I'm giving equal attention to everyone. But honestly, I kind of like that system of double casting, to be honest. It leads to some great creativity.
And because of their training program that dell'Arte has, do you feel that their cast are better prepared in terms of...
They're well prepared. Yeah, I have worked with other young artist companies before, and I've been a young artist myself, so I certainly know how it is. And I would say they came in very well prepared. They're very enthusiastic. The quality is really high with these singers. I'm very impressed.
Right, and you have a master's in vocal performance.
I do.
From the San Francisco Conservatory. So
Yes.
It's not like... Did you start switching directing while you were getting your master's? When did this all happen?
Yeah, I'll give you the brief version. I was getting my master's in voice. I was studying with Kathy Cook, who's phenomenal, at the San Francisco Conservatory, and having a great time as a soprano. And then I took, in my final year, a class called Directing for Singers. And it was like a lightning strike. It was the craziest thing. I was so into it so fast, and I started assistant directing for anyone who would have me. And I was lucky that I was surrounded by some really fabulous mentors who encouraged me to pursue that. So for my first couple of years out of grad school for singing, I did both. I was singing locally and doing young artist programs and just directing, working my way up to the point where I was directing more than I was singing, mostly because I was letting singing gigs go to do the directing. And I had a day where I had a Chautauqua audition lined up, and I canceled it to go to a directing thing, and I went, oh, well, my priorities have clearly shifted. Clearly this is where I need to put my heart and my energy. And so I let the professional singing go. I still love it. I wish I had more time to sing for my own enjoyment, and I miss the act of singing, but I love where I've ended up.
I do understand that I had a dual career as a music director and a music theater performer.
Oh, yeah?
And, I mean, for me, of course, it infused both sides.
Absolutely.
It also, drives some directors crazy. Because you're there asking those questions that they're like going, where's this coming from? That's because I do both.
Right.
And so, I mean, but that's also good because you really know what the singer has to go through yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that can be... Not all directors do that. I mean, there are a lot of directors who don't actually come from an acting or singing background.
For sure, and I actually think it allows me to trust my singers more, to be honest. I am all about making sure that I'm respecting their instincts, because I know how smart these artists are, and I know what kind of artistic integrity is possible if you trust them to bring their own stamp to things.
Now, you came here for the master's in directing, but what made you make that shift?
So I was self-taught isn't quite the right word as an opera director, but that's kind of what it was, because my training was as a singer, you know.
Right.
And then I was assistant directing for a lot of different people, and I was starting to get gigs, and I was also doing a lot of self-producing in San Francisco.
Right, that was Opera Theater Unlimited?
Yes, good job. Yeah, absolutely. We had 3 seasons of a lot of fun. It was fantastic. I'd love to get back there and do more with them someday, but we'll see if that's in the cards. But I actually had a very wise stage manager once say to me, you should think about maybe getting a degree in directing, because it would, hone your skill set. And if you're ever interested in doing theater and or film, you're really going to want to have some training in that area. So I started shopping around for programs, and the New School is a fantastic institution, and they have a tendency to accept people from all kinds of different backgrounds, so they were excited that I came from an all-opera background. And so it ended up being a really fabulous experience for me to have a completely different type of education. It was a very big change.
Mm-hmm. And who are some of your mentors then at New School?
The co-heads of the department are Stephen Brown-Fried and Thea Elyse, who are both absolutely incredible directors in their own right. And they have been fantastic guides. I'm also mentored by Elyse of Heartbeat Opera at the moment, and she has just been fantastic to work with.
Yes, and both she and Ethan, I know you assistant.
Oh yeah, Ethan. Almost forgot.
The program they came out of up at Yale really helped focus their work, I know, strongly.
Yes.
It's a unique program up there too.
Yeah, and I got to assist Ethan, so yeah, I've been very lucky to have some really great people in my life since I've come to New York.
And then a little sidebar for those sci-fi geeks. You directed and adapted Good Omens.
I sure did.
The Gaiman Hatchet.
Yep.
And how did you? Did you go for the rights? Did they say
no? It was at school.
Okay.
It was at school, so you can get away with these things. No tickets were sold. It was a classroom project.
Okay.
It's actually a really great class that is basically giving directors the tools to adapt and create. So it was me and a small group of actors in a classroom, and it was only 30 minutes long.
Okay.
I have a feeling Mr. Gaiman would approve. But I will say, now that the actual series is launched, I loved it, but I sat there just being mad that I couldn't be a part of it. It's not there yet.
Yes, I have to actually start watching it. But so let's go back to La Liberazione di Ruggiero. I didn't know this piece at all. Most people aren't going to know this piece. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's very early pre-Baroque music. It's an interesting piece. Certainly, I think there's something to the fact that it is by a female composer, and certainly those works haven't been given their due over the centuries. And this piece in particular, I'm not sure that I would call it an opera, to be honest with you. It feels almost more like a performance experience. Because at the time it was written as this celebration of a visiting member of nobility. So there certainly is a plot, but there's also an aspect to it that is just celebratory.
So it was
musical.
Commissioned by
the Medicis. The Medicis for this visiting prince. And in fact, the prologue
like
of the piece.
Mask, in a sense?
Yeah, kind of. It was the prologue of the piece is actually not about Ruggiero. It's about this person who is visiting, and it's invoking the god of music to tell this story. And then the very last line of the prologue is, "Hey, you want to hear a story?" And then we launch into it. So it's very different, but it's stunning music, and it's very fantastical and creative once you do. Even the prologue, it's the god of the sea introducing this piece. So it's fantasy from the start,
And then, then we get it's the story of Alcina and Melissa and Ruggiero,
Correct.
Which most of will recognize to a point from the other operas based on this.
Right.
But I know there are less characters, though, right?
There are less characters to an extent, but it is a very chorus-heavy piece. And actually, one of my favorite things about the version we're doing is that we're really making it into a collaborative group effort, because you have a series of really fantastic choruses. You have the water spirits in the prologue, the enchanted plants, Alcina's henchwomen, the monster chorus. It just gets better and better,
Cool. And did she write any other operas?
She must have written other works. You'd have to ask Charlie, our amazing music director. He's more of an expert than I am. But I think this is the only opera-esque thing that we have of hers. We've even lost some of the original music to this piece. There was a horse ballet in the original production.
Oh, well.
That we have lost the music to, unfortunately.
We don't get the horse ballet?
We do not get the horse ballet.
I don't know how we get them into La Mama, but you'd have to do that section on East 4th Street.
Yes.
If
we had the music, I'd be game, but,
horse ballet, oh my. Okay. So, what is next for you after this?
Well, I just graduated from the new school in May.
Yes.
I'm very excited to be doing this now. I don't have anything else on the books at the moment, going into that wonderful freelance life. However, the last year of school at the new school, we do a lot of film. And I actually found that I really liked film. I actually think it's because of my opera background. It's a very visual medium, and there's something about the pace and collaborative nature to film that I felt very at home in. So I'm actually doing a series of short films right now with a couple of the playwrights and actors of the program that I just graduated from, so we will be filming those over the month of August.
Cool. And you could maybe think about having short operas created for that.
Not a bad idea. Yeah. Combine my passions, why not?
That might be something New York Opera Alliance might be interested in for spring.
Oh?
Yes. I'm going to throw that out there, and since I'm part of that, maybe. So, cool. And so, what are the performance dates for Ruggiero?
We open on the 10th, and I believe we close on the 27th, but you don't quote me on that. It might be the 25th.
Yeah.
Close but no cigar.
And does each cast get an even amount as...
I believe so, yes. And they're both fantastic. Whatever night you come, it'll be a fun experience.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm seeing at the end of the whole session. But
excellent.
It's been lovely talking to you.
Absolutely. This was great.
Hello, this is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be chatting with Karen Rich, the managing director of dell'Arte Opera Ensemble, about their upcoming 17th annual summer festival, Voices from the Tower. Hello, Karen. How are you?
I'm great, Chuck. How are you doing?
Doing great. So, first of all, and I know these answers, but when does your festival run and where?
Our festival is going to run this year as part of the Summer Shares at La Mama program, and it's going to start on the 10th of August. It's opening night for La Liberazione di Ruggiero, and our closing will be on the 25th of August. So we've got a full roster of repertory performances running.
Great, and I'll make sure there's a ticket link on the interview page for you.
Super.
So the festival is titled Voices from the Tower. What is the focus of this season?
Well, we had a lot of discussion with the creative team in coming up with that festival title, and there was a strong feeling that even though we're articulating female voices, we didn't want to have the word women or female in the festival title. Nobody wanted to feel like we were objectifying the female voice. So the imagery of the tower is sort of prevalent throughout the season in various ways. We're doing 2 fairy tale operas. The Cendrillon by Pauline Viardot is obviously the children's story that we all know. And then we're also doing this world premiere called Princess Malène, which is drawn from a Grimm's fairy tale, the Brothers Grimm. And that story, as many of those stories do, touches in one way or another upon women being denied agency. And in one scene, a woman is actually locked in a tower. But beyond the literal tower reference, to me, the image resonated very strongly because a tower can be so many things. Obviously, it can be a prison. It can also be a sanctuary. It's a place where you can go for solitude or for inspiration. It can also lift you up to a height so that your voice can carry farther. We think of the ivy towers of academia. I mean, there's so many different ways that image can sort of pivot. So that's how we came up with that, and I think it really evokes the sense of carrying the woman's voice out to the world, and also the need for her to sometimes break free of societal constraints, which can form a tower of their own. So it's just metaphorically very vivid.
And within that, did that also drive your decisions on the creators of the new opera and the directors you hired?
Very much so, very much so. When we were discussing this project, we already knew that Whitney George and B. Goodwin were extremely interested in it, and they felt very drawn to the story on a number of levels. The entry point for selecting the story of Princess Malène to set for the world premiere came primarily from our artistic director, who was looking around to try to find an inspirational female voice to sort of feature and bring to the fore in this festival. And he hit upon Lily Boulanger, who's sort of this younger sister, a little bit in the shadow of Nadia now. But at the time when the two sisters were young, Lily was, I think, more the recognized one, sort of the prodigy, the genius, the very young, precocious one that a lot of people were seeking out and looking to work with. And she had composed a complete opera on this libretto.
Right, and that was based on the Maeterlinck.
Maeterlinck had set the piece as a play, and she got him to agree to collaborate with her in adapting that play as a libretto, which was a remarkable thing because it was the first opera that he had ever agreed to have set.
And it also took, I remember reading about this, it took a long time for his play to actually even be done because of the intrigue between who he gave the rights to and then how it finally got done.
He was very, very picky, and so they collaborated together and a complete work was created, and unfortunately all we have left is a few notes, a few letters between them, and a couple of scraps of paper with some of the full composition on it. So the initial intent was to go find that and bring it to the stage. And when that proved to be not possible, Christopher reached out to these two very talented ladies who were already intrigued by the story. They sort of knew some of the backstory, and they immediately said, "Oh my gosh, get out of our way. Nothing's going to stop us from not trying to recreate the Boulanger, obviously, but trying to bring this story into the light in sort of homage."
And this is your first commission,
It's our first new commission, yes. It's very exciting.
Yes. So that's Princess Baleine.
Yes.
And then the other full opera is La Liberazione di Ruggiero.
Right.
And that's unique also in its own point.
Well, and for a very sort of similar reason, it touches on the female voice again because it was the first opera ever composed by a woman. So Francesca Caccini was, I believe, the first woman to ever win the Prix de Rome. And she became quite attractive to the two ladies who were leading the Medici court at the time. They needed a piece to honor the visit of a Polish monarch, and they commissioned Caccini to write La Liberazione di Ruggiero, which features a very strong and alluring male hero. But he's a strong and alluring male hero who's been completely disempowered on the island of Alcina, and so the women in the story, who happen to be like handy sorceresses and very skilled, have to vie for control over his fate. So it's a wonderful way to honor both, the woman who created the piece and the women heroes and sort of anti-heroes who are trying to control the narrative of the story.
Yes, so is it similar to the other versions of their story, Alcina and her sisters and everything that we know about?
It is. The cast of characters is sort of condensed, really, from some of the other versions of the story that we know.
That's good.
So it really throws a very strong spotlight on the females and their interactions.
And how did you come across? How did Chris find this piece? Because I didn't even know about it.
Well, again, he's a very assiduous researcher, and he was just looking for ways to juxtapose voices of contemporary women with voices of women from the classical era, and there are so few that we can still find. And this Caccini opera just rose to the surface right away because it was the first. It was very successful. She was immensely popular in her day, and so it just seemed like a perfect fit. Bookending, the two bookends, the first one done, and the most recent that we'll probably be able to hear on that day.
Exciting. And then further now you have the scenes, the scene sequence tonight, which is scenes from the tower that has three different composers from three different periods, in a sense. And I mean, a fairy tale, a historical English historical, and an American historical.
Yes. And so these are all the Cendrillon, the Thea Musgrave, Mary Queen of Scots.
And Cendrillon is Pauline Viardot.
Pauline Viardot, that's right.
Yes.
And then Thea Musgrave's the Mary Queen of Scots. And then you've got the
Mrs.
President, right, which is by Victoria Bond. So again, you have not just female composers, but female composers who were drawn to set stories of strong women.
And librettists, because Viardot did her own libretto, I know Musgrave did, and Victoria has a female librettist in it too.
I can't remember the librettist's name, I'm sorry, but yes.
Yes. So that's a lot of things to be putting together.
It is.
And then there's still also the one concert, Les Boulangers.
Yes, which will feature not only a number of pieces by the Boulanger sisters, but Clara Schumann, Alma Mahler, who very few people know, wrote beautiful music. Wasn't really allowed to bring much of it to the stage because her husband wanted to be the only composer in the household. And then we are going to have a number of very exciting contemporary female composers featured on the program. Ellen Mendel, Valerie Salbach, and a number of other women who have brought work, forward, and it isn't necessarily getting a lot of audience, and we want to try to throw a spotlight on that.
And what is producing this like? I mean, it's just we were talking before we started about the rehearsal schedule alone.
Yeah.
And so it's like tonight you're actually rehearsing 2 of the pieces?
Pretty much on any given day, we have 2 works rehearsing side by side. It's just the only way to crank it out and get it all done.
And then also Ruggiero is double cast.
Ruggiero is double cast, so that needs extra time so that everybody gets equal stage time and equally prepared. So fortunately, for most of our rehearsal process, we have access to these fantastic studios here at the Elyse Studios, and we have 2 side-by-side gigantic studios just cranking all evening during the weekdays, and then on weekends it's just all day Saturday and all day Sunday side by side, multiple pieces. It's just like a constant carousel. People are coming in and people are going out, and one minute you hear this gorgeous classical Baroque music coming, and the next moment you hear it's contemporary American music coming from the other side. And it's quite a juggling act. But that's how we've been doing it actually for several years now. So we can get into a groove.
You were founded in 2000, so next season is your 20th, isn't it?
Well,
Sorta?
it is, but we call this year our 17th season because it took a couple of years to get off the sort of let's do a reading with music stands to, what we really want to do is present full work so that the artists are getting more of an experience of actually presenting, the full representation of what they've been preparing with us during the sort of training phase of the program.
And I know you were a professional opera singer before you founded. Were you still singing once you founded this, and then you phased it out some, or did you make the decision when you founded this company with Chris to stop then?
Early on, I did sing 1 or 2 roles. I did a Marschallin, I did a componist, I did a sesto. I did a few things, but again, that was early days before we were really doing fully staged work. As soon as the company really incorporated and formalized and developed a structure and this, sense of programming, I stepped into the administrative role because I felt very strongly that I never wanted people to feel like, dell'Arte is the company that's featuring this woman who's married to the artistic director. That was never the message we were trying to send. And I also felt that already by that point, I was ready to start passing sort of a torch to the younger generation. And having come up at a time when there were very few programs doing work that young artists could do, especially in New York City, I was extremely sensitive to the struggle that young singers have to find opportunities to go on stage, to not just do one quick performance of something, but to really prepare it, really dig in, get a full bite, a full experience that they could, not only list on their resume credibly and with pride and satisfaction, but that they had enough of their arms wrapped around a new role that they could walk into an audition room and say, I know this role, I'm ready to go, hire me. Because don't we all know, the catch-22 is no major company wants to hire a singer that hasn't already performed the role. And where are they going to do it?
Exactly.
Hopefully they're going to come and find us and do it with us first. Get a satisfying experience, have success with it, and have the confidence to step onto a larger stage in a larger venue and really make that first opportunity with a professional company a big success for them that they can launch a career from.
But it's your program is deeper than just that.
Yes.
And you have 2 parts to the program. When did you start the singers training program, and then when did you start the program for opera leaders?
The Opera Leaders Mentorship Program really started to evolve in 2015 and became structured in 2016. All of these different components that we're talking about, they're really part of a larger sort of year-round commitment that we make to developing both singers and designers and musical professionals, musicians, conductors, because it's become a full pipeline, and what we're really trying to do is open that pipeline right into the opera industry so that people can sort of springboard and step right out and, get those first big experiences. So it's all been evolving. It's just been like a kaleidoscope of components that have evolved together. We would do a season and then we would find, we really could have benefited, everyone would have benefited if we'd had more of this, and so we had, a directing mentor. Everybody could have benefited if we'd had a production management mentor, and so layer by layer we've built this in. So it's really all one
I know
thing.
you've given a lot of directors their first chance at doing opera.
Yes.
I know last year Owen Horsey, although he had a lot of strengths with as a Shakespeare director and teacher, which do pair over, but opera is still, as we all know, a completely different animal.
Yes. Working with singers and learning to speak the stage language that they have to speak and learning, where their focus is oriented. Opera singers have, like 6 click tracks running in their heads simultaneously, don't they? Because they're working in a foreign language. It's like Ginger Rogers trying to do everything Fred Astaire's doing backwards in high heels, right? And so directors have a special challenge, and we try to sort of square the circle on that by giving the singing actors as much acting training as we can while we're developing their roles, so that they can learn also the language of the directors that they're working with.
Right.
So we've had people come in from the film side of things. We had Knud Adams several years ago do a Suor Angelica with us. That was absolutely stunning. And you mentioned Owen. And then other directors who have maybe put their toe in opera, either in an academic format or in other
Which would
venues.
be like B. Goodman.
Victoria Crutchfield, who worked with us a number of years ago. So these would be people that are looking to get like the first New York City fully produced with orchestra, that they're going to get a review and they're going to, and it's been incredibly gratifying to see how some of these people have just blossomed out and rushed towards the operatic medium. And so we feel like we're able then to offer to opera these directors who might not necessarily have otherwise found their way, into that genre.
So, in a sense, this is still the beginning of your season. Are you on the fiscal year of July through June, or are you?
We are, which kind of inverts things, really,
Right.
because the festival's launching now.
Right.
The festival's a product of everything that we've been doing since last November,
Right.
to get everything ramped up to this point. So as soon as we finish the festival, we turn right around and start working on what's coming in the next year. So we're always kind of straddling that. Well, we ended the fiscal year, but the program that we commenced in that fiscal year is moving on. It makes everybody's head turn around backwards, and I feel the same way. But yes, we are starting a new year. So in a way, the festival is it's a culmination, and it's also a kickoff, to get everybody remembering.
And then, do you do any other scenes during the recitals during the year? I mean, this is your big splash.
This
God
is the
knows.
big thing, and we pack it all in together because you get tremendous economies of scale.
Right.
You've got the venue, you've hung the lights, you've
absolutely.
dressed it, and the orchestra are sitting down in their seats every night. And so it's a wonderful way of really giving, not only the audiences get this fantastic just panoply of things to look at and listen to, but the singers get the real experience of working in repertory, which is not something as a young singer coming out of conservatory you've ever done before. And yet it's how most opera seasons, especially in Europe, are structured.
Yes, and I mean, the other thing is it's August, when most other places, especially the Met, except for, they're outside, let's show a movie, or occasional concert in the parks, are silent.
They are, and even a lot of the summer festivals that take place, up in the beautiful countryside, they're mostly done by the end of July. And then August is just kind of this little hiatus while everybody gets, takes a deep breath and gets ready to hear and see all the things that are coming in the fall. So it's been a wonderful little sort of segue point for us. We can offer people who are still looking to listen to some really good stuff, we can offer them something. It's right here in town. They don't have to get on a bus. They can just come on down to La Mama and see wonderful things.
Well, it's been great learning about this with you, and I look forward to seeing all the productions.
Oh, I hope you come and bring many, many friends.
I will do my best.
Thank you, Chuck.